Good evening, all. I am Mike. I am a recovered alcoholic. Karen, thank you so much for your service, your pinch hitting, it sounds like. Um, my home group is Out to Breakfast Online. Uh, the power of God separating me from alcohol on the 1st of November of 1983, and it is that power that has kept me separated from alcohol. And that since that time. And I have Alcoholics Anonymous and I will say the traditions for keeping that, for keeping AA here so that I could come calling back in 2005. And as I tell you what I was like, what happened, what I'm like now, you'll understand what I mean by that. Um, this group is called Serenity Improvement Now, I think is what it was. I'm going to really try and focus on that as I go through what I was like and the rest of my story. And which my story should is we read the big book. My short story is how I came to build and continue a relationship with God. It's been up and down, kind of rocky, not a vertical line. And thank God for that, because it has brought me to you at this moment right here and right now, through all that, those 40 years that I described. Love how you read the back, the forward to the fourth edition. I just love that. And really what I love about it specifically is it mentions, I'm trying to find it, it talks about how the literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message. This is, yeah, I lost the part about it, so old, but this is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is also it. That's the third edition. I got literature right here because when I go to a meeting, I better have my big book. It's like going to class. Although I wasn't the best student, sometimes I didn't go with my book. When I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I have my book. Because if I need the founder's words, if I need the words and the integrity of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's in this book. What got me to you tonight is in this book. This literature, exactly as it is. No personal ambition, no arrogant individual, no arrogant group within Alcoholics Anonymous should ever think about or consider changing the words in this book. I bring that up because I got some nonsense questionnaire, and I'm digressing a little bit of what it's like now, maybe what I'm like now. But this literature in preserving this fellowship goes back 80 some odd years. Doesn't need to be changed. It should not be changed, because we're here tonight because of that literature. And 80 years from now, God willing, with the protection of the traditions, the literature will be the same as it is today, helping maybe grandkids of ours, great grandkids, who knows? I recall the first time taking a drink. And I mean, maybe it wasn't the first time, but the really first time with my pals. And they rolled me onto the grass, the lawn at my folks' house. And I don't know how old, it was probably 14, 15 years old. I should even back up, because I remember as a little kid feeling inadequate, unworthy, alone, and afraid, feeling less than, not a part of the kids in school, whether it was first grade, fifth grade, eighth grade, is probably when I took that first drink, or ninth when they rolled me onto we were driving by then, or someone was, so they had to. And I remember I had a comb. My mom and dad got me into the bathroom. And I had a comb, and the comb. This isn't a comb, but I was doing this to myself in the bathroom, like I wanted to kill myself. Why? Because, like I said, I was inadequate, unworthy, alone, and afraid. I had no place in this world. And I proceeded to throw up and be sick and all that. But I kept doing it. I kept, that was fun. and my pals, didn't drink like that. And they schlepped me around, and I drank and drove sometimes, and didn't know how I got to where I got. But I thought it was a party, and I thought I was choosing to drink at that time just because I thought I, you know, liked it, and it brought me to be a part of. Now, I didn't drink like many of the others. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until I, stopped drinking. Didn't know that. A few years later, I was in college, and I got a DUI, and spent a night in jail, and had to visit with my dad, an attorney, had to, you know, listen to what I was going to have to do, community service, pay a fine. And I knew I'd never drink and drive again. Boy, that was humiliating, don't you know? That was humiliating. So I'd walk everywhere because campus was until I didn't walk. And there was one night where I drove down to the theater. I think it was with the classmates, and drank and made a fool in the theater, and drove back home. Drove home. Woke up that next day, and knew I had to stop and help. I just cried out for help. Just cried out for help. Didn't know what to, didn't know who to. I mean, I had somewhat of a religious upbringing, but I maybe believed in a little bit of that thing called God. But and I didn't know it at the time, but it was going to be answered. That was going to be answered. It wasn't a prayer. It was just a beg. I need help. Going to class someday, and I opened a newspaper. They had newspapers back then. Some of you are probably too young to know what a newspaper is. And in the school newspaper, it said something like, it was only 2 lines too. And it said, problem with drinking or need help stopping drinking. It was a phone number. Oh my, there was my answer for help. And I heeded the call. I heeded the answer. I heeded the lifeline. I made the call. And went to my first meeting soon thereafter. I got directed to go in and walk into a group of people that at the time looked old, like me. Maybe as old as Max too. I don't know. They could have been old, but they were old. But I felt at home. They were different than me, but yet I felt at home. They talked my language. They told me that if I had a drinking problem, I was in the right place. And I stuck around. I connected with one guy specifically who connected me with some other guys. And I joined the fellowship. Small F fellowship. I joined the small F fellowship. And I was part of that fellowship for about 22 years. Okay, so, but I will say that for those first, for that year, it was great. Just, I was 21 years old and just having all kinds of fun. Came back to Portland, Oregon, and, subsisted on meetings. Because in the early 80s, late 80s, it was just, I don't remember anymore, but meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, and put the plug in the jug, and there was all kinds of outside stuff, and it was I was just staying sober because that's what I thought it was. I thought this was a non-drinking society, right? We were just here to not drink, and we did it by meetings and talking with other people, and that's all I knew. And I kept getting sicker and sicker. I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea. I mean, maybe to some people on the outside, maybe internally I knew because I was doing things that I didn't want to do. I was morally and ethically bankrupt. I thought, my moral and philosophical way of living was not, that wasn't important. I was sober. Got married to, I took hostage. I took a hostage. I got married and boy, I was 4 years sober. I think she probably was, she questioned people because she knew people that I knew. Grew up in Portland, Oregon, and so it was a small community where we were part of. He's 4 years sober. Yeah, good guy now. Doesn't drink anymore. Isn't that what it's about? So 2005 comes crashing down or crashing in or whatever you want to say it. And I'd been dishonest. I'd been doing things I didn't want to do, and even with people who I didn't want to do them with. And so I get caught. Thank you, God. And, I needed help. I needed help because I was going to drink or kill myself. And came crawling back to Alcoholics Anonymous and found some people who knew what untreated alcoholism was, who knew what it took to get and stay sober and get recovered. I introduced myself as a recovered alcoholic because they waited till the title page, right? To tell us that we can recover from this hopeless state of mind and body. Or that this is a story of 100 people who, what does it say? Many thousands of men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. I didn't know what that meant, but I got introduced in 2005 to some people who did. I got some CDs of people who introduced themselves as recovered alcoholics. A guy named Mark Houston. If you haven't heard of Mark Houston talk before the end of the night, go find one and listen to one. Don Pritz is another one. Chris R., who's still around, God bless him. I just got to see him a little bit ago, carrying the message of this book, of the literature. So I started listening to that. And I started seeking the fellowship of the Spirit, started doing things that this book talked about. I started reading it, started following, again, what it said, finding others to read it with, finding others to, but it wasn't much. I mean, it was, again, there were people, this was 2005 to 2020. Oh, still a lot of 90 and 90. Still a lot of just put the plug in the jug and just go to meetings, especially where I live. I mean, I could tell you I got the eye rolled, I got the scoffs when I introduced myself in towns as a recovered alcoholic, but I kept doing it. Why? Because I started to see that the spiritual malady, when I addressed the spiritual malady, that my physical and mental malady was straightening out, was starting to straighten out. It had straightened out. Hence, I was recovered. And I continue to focus on the spiritual malady I have, the spiritual solution, which if I continue to seek it, I love the promise in step 11 that says our thinking will be on the plane of inspiration. That's where my thinking is today. It's inspired by and through the power of God in Alcoholics Anonymous to be of use as much as I can, in any way I can. But I got to go back to what was happening. So, about 2000, I don't know when it was, 16, 17, I don't have it here with me, but I was still going. I was reading this book. I was listening to the CDs. I was hearing this kind of, this talk. It wasn't in my town. I was seeking it. I went to travel to places to hear the message. I was 3 weeks from going up to Tri-Cities, Washington, where Mark Houston was going to talk. He passed away 3 weeks before I got to see him. But I was trying to seek all of that because I was starting to understand and starting to feel what this book was communicating. See, if I precisely follow what this book stresses, what this book is precise instructions, I start to feel what it says. I start to experience promises that are throughout this book. I mean, when someone says, well, you read the promises at the end, Mike, which ones? Can I read the third step promises? Of course, they always mean a certain ones, right? I want to read the fifth step promises that I walk hand in hand with the sunlight of the Spirit. I want to read, again, like I said, 11th step promises. My thinking can be on the plane of inspiration. There's so much that if I do this work, I start to understand what it means that I find him now. Because that literally means I am in the presence of a loving God right now. Because I will never be here again for me at 5:24 in the PM on December 19th, 2023, with all of you people. Never again. I'm having a spiritual experience as we speak. And if I'm awake and aware of that, I just can't stop from the insides giving me a feeling that just is not describable. That spiritual experience, that serenity I have because of the power of God in and through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is something that I can't define, is I can't describe. I can only tell you how to get to it, how to get it. I started walking guys through the steps, and they started having spiritual experiences. Started going through and reading in coffee shops with them because I was following what Mark Houston, Chris R. talked about, and many others. And I started, having a little effect there, a little bit, tasting a little bit. This again before 2020. Went to a group out in Bend, Oregon. Again, I'm in Oregon, and I got the scoffs, got the eye rolls, and this little girl comes over to me and she hands me a business card and it says, "Thank you, Mike, for providing hope by introducing yourself as a recovered alcoholic." Oh, boy, if at that time when I felt alone in this fellowship, that didn't get me, yeah, it did. It did, because I knew the fellowship is out there. The fellowship of the Spirit is out there. I just need to keep seeking, keep talking about this book. Even when people want to talk about the dead cats, I kept talking about the book. Even when they wanted to talk about, outside literature and how wonderful it is. Why would we talk about outside literature when we've got so much inside AA? I mean, I've got books right here, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but so much AA literature. Pass it on. AA Comes of Age, Language of the Heart, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. I could go on and on. Why would we want to bring in outside literature that may or may not give us the promises that big book offers? I can't answer the question because I don't know. But we have so much literature. Reading this literature with others has given me, and again, I'm not even at 2020, but I started to read that, and when she brought that to me in that card, I still have that card, and it just reminded me of how vital Alcoholics Anonymous and the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is. We have one message and one message only. It's to help alcoholics recover from alcoholism. That's our real reason for existence. It says on page 107 in AA Comes of Age. We know what our existence is. We know what existence is, right? The real reason for our existence is to help alcoholics who still suffer. Now, I can tell you this. The other thing is, and I'll point on that because I still hear a lot of times, the newcomer is the most important person in the room. The newcomer is the one that we got to. It says in our fifth tradition to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. I can raise my hand and tell you at 22 years, sober, I was suffering. I won't say more than anybody else, but I was suffering. I would have drank or killed myself had there not been the voice to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. So the alcoholic that still suffers is the most important person in the room. That's because there's no alcoholic above or below any other alcoholic in the room. We're equal, no matter what. Bill Wilson wrote about that. He wrote about it and he put it on page 17 of the big book. We're average Americans. We're all sections of the country. We come from many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who would normally not mix. And we come together as equals. There's one thing and one thing only: alcoholics. Anything else divides us. Any other distinction I have divides us, divides me. I want to come together as equals so that we together can walk on the path. This path that, the sunlight shines upon us. This path that gives us these promises, it promises and fulfills the promises. So those are the things, that's what I was like. That's kind of what happened along the way. What I'm like now, because I'm not there. Not there yet. No, Mike, you're getting a little hurried. Because we're almost to 2020. We know what happened in 2020, right? We wouldn't be here together on this platform had it not been for 2020. One of the greatest, I don't know, I sometimes say two, but for sure top 5 greatest thing that's ever happened to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was not good for the outside world, was it? It was really bad. I mean, it still can be when catch that virus. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, because we suffer from alcoholism and we don't have any opinion on outside issues, and we don't, we only care about helping alcoholics. This platform rocketed Alcoholics Anonymous to a worldwide fellowship that none of us, maybe that's a presumption, but none of us never knew existed. Maybe we knew it existed, but did anybody ever go to Trinidad or Madagascar or the Soviet Union or Ukraine in 1 week? In 1 week? South Africa or Egypt, Tallahassee, Florida, or Venezuela in 1 week? We can do that today. We can do that today because of the power of modem to modem. Can you imagine they wrote the forward to the 4th edition, and y'all again read it and have the literature, and right at the end, modem to modem. They wrote that in 2001, I believe. They didn't know how important, vital modem to modem would be 19 years forward. But here it is. Here we are, communicating, carrying the message one alcoholic to another, or again, maybe not one to one like the book says, but that's where recovery starts, isn't it? 172 folks here tonight hearing the message of recovery. And I'm hoping I'm bringing it, the message of recovery, the message of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I'm saying anything else other than that, ignore it. There's my disclaimer that I forgot at the beginning. Because if it's outside my experience or outside the AA Big Book, it's just my opinion. And we all know how many opinions are in this room, 172 plus. But what's not an opinion, and what really is cool, is that common solution, that one thing we all have. Again, page 17, the tremendous fact, we have a way out. We have Alcoholics Anonymous, on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join together in brotherly and harmonious action. Let's go back to that 172 in this room. How many other things could we all agree upon, absolutely agree upon, and march together in brotherly and harmonious action? I'm guessing the answer is 0. But let's do that one thing. And that's our literature. That's Alcoholics Anonymous and the message. that we have to carry to the alcoholic that still suffers. We don't need to change it. We don't need to adapt it. God, can you imagine? See, the outside world, we all know the outside world, what's happening, right? Chaos, lack of unity. And I won't even go on, right? We have something inside of Alcoholics Anonymous that's unique. It's unique to the world, based on spiritual principles that guide us today, that guide me through those steps and those traditions. Those spiritual principles has Alcoholics Anonymous breathing today, if you will, a breathing entity that is spiritual in nature, that is spiritual in how we have this life. The power of God, as I said, has brought me to you all. And that power I get through the daily disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. Those daily disciplines of continue, grow, and help are something that, again, help me start to understand why Alcoholics Anonymous is still here. Because I've grown through the steps. I've done the steps. I've carried the message of the steps. I walk others through the steps. And it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. Because if selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles, as it describes in 3, then I go 4 through 12, and I understand, and I have found out that, as Bill wrote, self-sacrifice is why I'm here today. Through those steps and the 12th step, having had that spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, tried to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So these principles and the steps, and all of a sudden, I don't stop there. The traditions are part of this 36 spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because it's not just the steps. The steps would not be here had it not been for the traditions. Our traditions protect our message. Our message is and are the steps. They help me form that relationship with God and grow that relationship with God, as I said, 10, 11, 12. And when I grow that relationship with God and build it, I find I want more. I hear people saying, oh, the steps are for, what do they say, for me, and the traditions are for the groups, right? You hear that ever? Well, who's the groups? What's the group? I have a home group. We are members of groups. Hopefully one home group. Hopefully we understand the wisdom of being a member of one home group, where I have one vote in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's vital to have that one vote. If I want to say in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a member of home group that has a vote. So I start to understand these spiritual principles of the traditions as I study them and go through them with my sponsees, like someone did for me. The girl who gave me that little card introduced me to the traditions and how vital they were. Because here's how I was, what I was like before she gave me that. I was on fire. I was on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, except I was leaving out 2/3 of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was on fire for the message, for the recovery message. But what's going to protect that message? How's that message going to be here 80 years from now? Well, it's going to be here because I'm going to read the appendix 1. Again, go to the literature, because as we understand, the literature has preserved the fellowship. And it says, I'll just read the first paragraph. Appendix 1, the AA tradition, to those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has often made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. So we have an obligation, as I see it, as I've gone and learned these traditions and understand why they're vital and what their importance is. Well, they're important 80 years from now, because there's some uncounted alcoholics 80 years from now that are going to need this message. And again, they may be someone's grandkids or great grandkids in this room. So I started to understand why these traditions are so vital for me to study, so vital for me to learn and follow and practice, because they are spiritual principles. They are spiritual principles like this, like the set of spiritual principles in the steps. And if I ignore those, again, ignoring 2/3 of Alcoholics Anonymous, how do I know that Alcoholics Anonymous will be here? And do I even care if I'm not studying, reading, and carrying on these spiritual principles in the traditions? Do I even care? I don't know if that's a rhetorical question or not. But the reality is, if I care enough, I start to read the AA Comes of Age. I start to read Language of the Heart, where Bill wrote the tradition starting in 1946. I start to understand what pass it on and read that and study that. And I do that because I want AA to be here 80 years from now. It was here when I came in 1983. It was here when I crawled back in 2005. Because those traditions are, by some, they're adhered to, they're studied, they're valued by some. Many think the sacred obligation that I have of these traditions, and I believe them, and I follow them, and I practice them, because many are showing me the experience, strength, and hope that I can carry on when I study these traditions. The concepts also. That one, a little bit but studying them and learning them. And I'm going to do that till the day you bury me, just like with these traditions. The principles and the importance of those steps today, yes, they're vital to me. But even more vital to me today are the principles and the study of the traditions and helping others, not just through the program of recovery, but continuing that work through the traditions. So 2020, I started to understand we're not just a fellowship of Oregon or Portland, Oregon. We're not just a fellowship of the United States. We're a fellowship around the world. And what's happening in the United States doesn't matter inside the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is a worldwide fellowship. And we encompass everybody from around the world. And we have a message for everybody. Why else would we be printing? And I don't know the exact number. I'm sure someone here much more brighter than me knows this. How many languages is our big book in? We're a worldwide fellowship. And as we evolve and change inside with customs and practices, I love how they pointed that out. That gets into tradition 4. Customs and practices are just that. They're not something that I can steamroll the traditions with. Tradition 4 is not a steamroller for the other traditions. Tradition 4, which everybody calls the autonomy, and we can do what we want, autonomy. No, we can't. It directly says customs and practices within that tradition. This custom and practice of this group is having a speaker come speak for 40, 50 minutes, whatever it was. My home group is a 4-minute lead, but we really lengthened it 25%. 5 minutes now. Whew, I can barely say my name in 5 minutes. But it's a 5-minute lead, and everybody gets to share for 2 minutes. Customs and practices. Do anybody go to in-person meetings? Coffee or tea? Cupcakes or cookies? Customs and practices in the fellowship. Those are the things we get to determine, not the fact that society in one specific country is changing and doing this and doing that, and we have to do it in AA. Why? Why is the custom? Why are the laws and the societal practices of the United States have to be imported inside of AA when AA is a worldwide fellowship? Then it doesn't become a worldwide fellowship. But not only that, we change the message. we've changed the message. And changing this message might change these life-saving promises that we have throughout this book. You know, the power of God in this book, it's throughout. It doesn't stop. This is a spiritual program. I love the part where it said, maybe it was today or was it yesterday? I don't know if y'all read Daily Reflection, but I think it talked about stress, the spiritual, what was the word? Spiritual principle, spiritual freely. It's in working with others, the chapter. Stress the spiritual feature, maybe freely. We don't have to hide this as a program about God or higher power or spiritual. We ought not, we shouldn't. And we can point out if someone bristles, as the big book says, at religion, that's okay. We're not a religious organization. We're not a religious program. It spells it out in black and white, forward to the second edition. AA is a spiritual program, not a religious program. We don't align with any religion. If we read the history, we understand Bill went to great lengths. And he had a lot of teachers, religious in nature. But he went to great lengths to make this for inclusive, most inclusive organization in the world, bar none. Think there's another one? Let's go, toe to toe. Because your organization excludes someone. This one excludes no one if you're an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic, and that's why, as we read, was it Tradition 3 and the 12 and 12? Over 61, 100, I can't remember the number. Membership requirements. Now how many we have? I just said, we got one. If you're an alcoholic, nothing else matters. Come in, sit down, have some coffee. Let's read this book. Recovery begins, one alcoholic sharing with another. The most inclusive organization in the world. And there are many who want to change it. We got to be on the firing lines. I'm going to wrap up here as I talk about it. I've talked from 2020 to today. As I continue to do those things I've described, I keep reading this book with others. I keep asking others to, I've done a GSR, I've been a DCM. I never wanted to be in service. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have run from those things. See, I have an intensity and an earnestness about me. I have a judgmental and intolerant bone. Any of you have something like that? You know, and it's really strong. So I don't want to do this group stuff, but I do those things now because of the power of God through the steps that have given me the peace and serenity, that have improved my spiritual life on the daily, so that I can do those things, that I can sit in as a GSR or DCM or my group conscience meeting, my home group. Can you imagine my home group? They disagree with me on things. Do they know who I am? Yeah, they do. I'm one alcoholic, sitting in the back of the room waiting for the group to decide. If they ask me, okay. I have to admit, sometimes even if they don't ask me, I might. But I can do these things today because of the power of the steps and building on those power of the steps, those traditions, and knowing that I get to be a part of, not apart from. Not the kid who was brought into this world feeling less than, needing the solution of a drink, which I find today the solution is much more than a drink, is a connection with the power greater than myself, is the power of God, is the power with you all. A connection here that today brings me closer to that God and knowing that I'm here for now. Getting to understand that I have a sacred obligation as a recovered alcoholic to provide hope to the alcoholic that still suffers. But I can't do it if this message is gone. I can't do it if this message is muddled or changed. I implore you all, if you haven't yet, start to study the traditions. Learn why they're important. learn why they're there, and carry that message to others. Let's spread this message to the whole world as we have the opportunity to in Alcoholics Anonymous today. Because this organization came long before me. And God willing, it'll be here long after me, helping alcoholics suffer from the terrible malady unique to us all, alcoholism. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope there's something in there that helps you. And I want to thank Stephen for asking me, and hope him and his wife are well. God bless you all. God bless Alcoholics Anonymous.